Hello, and welcome back to Inner Warrior, a mental health podcast. Whatever battle brought you here today, I'm glad you're here. Today, we're going to talk about anxiety, but probably not in the way you're expecting. This isn't going to be a lesson from a textbook. I'm not going to spend the next 30 minutes listing symptoms, and I'm definitely not going to tell you to just relax. Instead, I'd like to talk about what anxiety actually feels like. Because if you've never experienced it, it could be incredibly difficult to understand. And if you have, you've probably spent a lot of your life trying to explain something that never quite seems to make sense to other people. So let me begin with a question. Have you ever been absolutely convinced that something terrible was about to happen, only to realize later that nothing happened at all? If you live with anxiety, there's a good chance you're nodding your head right now. And if you've never experienced anxiety, you may be wondering, why would someone feel that way? That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Because understanding anxiety begins with understanding one very important truth. Anxiety isn't trying to hurt you. It's actually trying to protect you. The problem is, sometimes it protects us from danger that isn't actually there. And when that happens, life can become very confusing. Let's talk about why, okay? For a long time, I believed anxiety meant something was wrong with me. I thought my body was betraying me. My mind had somehow become an enemy. I couldn't have been more wrong. One of the most important things I learned was that anxiety isn't a sign that your body is broken. It's actually a sign that your body is trying to do exactly what it was designed to do, protect you. Think about that for a moment. Your brain has one job above almost everything else: keeping you alive. Thousands of years ago, that meant helping us survive predators, danger, and real threats. Our brains became incredibly good at spotting danger. The problem is, our brains don't always know the difference between a trigger in front of us and a frightening thought inside of us. When your brain believes you're in danger, it doesn't stop to ask for permission. It reacts. Your heart beats faster, your breathing changes, your muscles tense, your senses become sharper, your body prepares to protect you, all before you've had a chance to think. That's not weakness, that's survival. The challenge is sometimes that alarm system becomes too sensitive. Imagine the smoke detector in your house, right? It's designed to alert you when there's a fire. Well, that's a good thing. But if it also went off every time you made toast or every time you took a shower, the alarm isn't broken. It's just responding to something that isn't actually dangerous. Anxiety can work the same way. Your nervous system is trying to protect you, even when protection isn't needed. When I finally understood that, everything began to change. Not overnight, not instantly, but gradually, because I stopped asking what's wrong with me and started asking, why is my brain trying so hard to protect me right now? That's a different question, and it leads to a very different conversation. Here's something I wish everyone understood about anxiety. People often think anxiety begins with thoughts. Sometimes it does, but many times your body actually reacts first. Your heart races, your stomach tightens, your breathing changes. Then your mind starts searching for a reason, almost like a detective trying to solve a mystery. Why do I feel this way? What's wrong? Did I miss something? That's when anxiety becomes frightening because your brain is trying to explain sensations that were created by the alarm itself. Understanding that was one of the biggest turning points in my own journey because once I realized my body wasn't betraying me, I, I, I stopped fighting it quite so hard. It became more curiosity instead of terrifying. And sometimes curiosity is the first step toward healing. If you've never experienced anxiety, it can be difficult to understand why someone can't simply calm down. From the outside, everything might look completely normal. Someone is standing in line at the grocery store, sitting at a restaurant, driving down the road, talking with friends. Nothing looks out of place. But inside, it can feel like your entire body is sounding an alarm. One of the hardest things about anxiety is that it often convinces you something is wrong before you even know why. Your heart starts racing, your breathing changes, your stomach tightens, your hands may become sweaty, you feel restless, your muscles tense, and suddenly your mind starts asking questions. Again, what's happening? Am I okay? Why do I feel like this? That is one of the cruelest parts of anxiety. Your body creates the alarm, and then your mind desperately searches for the explanation. Sometimes it blames the room, sometimes the people around you, sometimes your health, sometimes the situation you're in. Anything that seems to explain why your body suddenly feels like it's in danger, but many times the danger isn't outside of you, it's the alarm itself. I'll give you an example. 7 years ago, I was working at a job, and my boss came to me and said, you've been doing a lot of hard work. I'd like to give you a promotion. I want to make you a front end manager. What do you think of that? And at that time, even though I was going through anxiety and I was trying to do what I can to break free of it, I was like, you know what? This is a phenomenal opportunity. Make more money, more responsibility. I had spent so many years prior to that, even before I developed the agoraphobia, in retail. And I was like, this is my way to get back up to where I want to be. So I said, yeah, I definitely will take it. So a couple of days later, I'm sitting in my room and I was just watching TV, and all of a sudden, my heart started racing. Wasn't thinking anything negative. I wasn't thinking about the job. I wasn't thinking about anything overly important. I was just sitting there trying to watch TV. But my heart started racing, and I was like, huh, that's odd. And I immediately grabbed my blood pressure machine and I put it on my arm, and I took my blood pressure, and I was like, oh my God, it's way high. I was like, okay, am I having a heart attack? Am I just experiencing symptoms of high blood pressure? What's going on? This is what I was saying to myself. And then a couple hours later, or not even a couple hours, probably a couple of minutes later, I started to feel a little more relaxed. I tried doing some breathing to try to help myself relax because I figured, okay, maybe it's just anxiety. But it kept happening for days. I went to the doctor. Doctor said, yeah, you probably have high blood pressure. I want to prescribe you this medication. But before you can take it, I want you to talk to your psychiatrist about the medications that you're already taking, because this can lower your blood pressure and your pulse rate. And medication that you're taking kind of has the same effect. So I want to make sure that you can take this. Well, I called my psychiatrist. I explained this to him. And he said to me, oh, just take your medication as prescribed. You're not having a heart attack. You're having panic attacks. And then it hit me like, what? Wait, hold on. He wasn't wrong. So I literally just sat there and thought about it. I ended up quitting my job. I stopped working because I was like, this is too stressful for me, I guess. And I continued on. But I remember wondering, why can't I just be normal? I don't know. Maybe you've asked yourself that too. Maybe you've looked around a room and thought, everyone else seems fine. Why am I the only one struggling? I know I have. If you have, I want you to hear me very clearly. You are not weak. You're not broken. And you're certainly not the only one. My story that I just told you tells you that. Plus, what you're experiencing, millions of people experience that every single day as well. The difference is most people don't talk about it. One thing I wish more people understood is that anxiety isn't always loud. Sometimes it shows up as overthinking. That was a perfect example that I gave you with my blood pressure. That was me overthinking. It's constantly preparing for things that may never happen. Again, that heart attack that I was thinking I might be having. Never happened. It's people pleasing because you're afraid of disappointing someone. Sometimes it's avoiding places, not because you don't have to go, but because your nervous system has learned to associate them with fear. Anxiety wears a lot of different masks. That's why it can be so difficult to recognize. And there's something I wish someone had told me years ago. Just because your body feels afraid doesn't always mean you're in danger. Read that again in your mind. Just because your body feels afraid doesn't always mean you're in danger. Because that one realization changed my life. My body wasn't lying to me, it was trying to protect me. It just didn't realize there wasn't anything to protect from me. That understanding didn't make anxiety disappear, but it did make it feel less mysterious, less overwhelming, and less powerful. Because when we understand what's happening, we're much less likely to fear the experience itself. And for me, that was the beginning of everything changing. For some people, anxiety stays in the background. It's like a radio playing softly in another room, always there but manageable. For others, there are moments when that volume suddenly gets turned all the way up. That's what a panic attack can feel like. It doesn't usually ask for permission. It doesn't send you a warning. It simply arrives. One moment you're standing in line, driving your car, sitting in a meeting, watching the television. The next, your entire body feels like you're in immediate danger, even when there's no danger at all. I had spoken in last episode about a trip I took to go to a concert, and I was experiencing high anxiety and then a full blown panic attack. That is what I'm talking about. Your entire body, my entire body, believed I was in immediate danger for whatever reason, even though there was no danger at all. So, what ends up happening, like for me, and could be for you too, your heart races, your breathing changes, your chest feels tight, your thoughts speed up, and before long, your mind starts trying to make sense of what's happening. Am I having a heart attack? I explained that earlier. Am I dying? That's a thought I've had. Am I losing control? That's a big one. Am I losing control? Because when we don't feel like we're in control of something, which is what our body is doing to us during an anxiety attack, during a panic attack, or even in depression, the fact of the matter is we are not in control of what's happening to us. And that is scary. Those thoughts can feel incredibly real when we're not in control. Am I dying? Am I having a heart attack? They're incredibly real at that moment because your body has already convinced your brain that something terrible must be happening. That's one of the reasons panic attacks can feel so frightening. It's not all in your head. You're experiencing very real physical sensations, very real emotions, very real fear. This misunderstanding isn't that you're experiencing isn't real. This misunderstanding is what your nervous system believes those sensations mean. I wish someone had explained that to me years ago because for a long time, I wasn't afraid of the world. I was afraid of what my own body might suddenly do. Think about that for a moment. Not afraid of danger, afraid of the feeling of fear itself. That can become an exhausting way to live. For me, it's so crazy. My anxiety was revolving around the idea of driving, but not the fact of driving, if that makes any sense. I have no fears, in all honesty. Well, I do actually have one fear, and I'll get to that in a brief moment. But I'm not afraid to get on a plane and go across country, or if I wanted to, even go to, across the world. I'm not afraid to drive. I'm not afraid to walk. I'm not afraid of simple things that everybody takes for granted that doesn't experience anxiety. What I fear is fear. Let that sink in for a moment. I fear fear. The fear I am talking about is the symptoms that my body produces: the racing heartbeat, the tightness in the chest, the feeling like I can't breathe, the moment that my throat feels like it's closing. Those are the things that I fear. Those are the symptoms of fear. So think about it. Again, not afraid of danger, afraid of the feeling of fear itself. That was my exhausting way to live. And then what happens? Many people begin avoiding the places where those feelings have happened before. I certainly did. Not because those places are dangerous, because they weren't, but because our brains are trying to protect us from experiencing panic again. That's one of the ways anxiety slowly begins shrinking someone's world. It did for me. It shrunk it so much. I couldn't even go a quarter mile from my house, and sometimes walking, I could barely go to my neighbors, less than 100 feet away. But we'll talk much more about that in our episode on agoraphobia. But for now, I simply want you to understand this. If you've ever experienced panic, you're not imagining it, you're not overreacting, and you are not going crazy. You're experiencing a nervous system that's trying very hard to keep you safe. It just doesn't realize that you already are safe. And once we begin understanding that, something remarkable begins to happen. The fear, it slowly starts changing. Not because panic disappears, but because it no longer feels like an unexplained mystery. And when the mystery begins to fade, something else quietly takes its place. And that is understanding. One of the biggest turning points in my own journey was realizing I didn't have to spend every day fighting anxiety. That might sound strange, because for years, that's exactly what I tried to do. I fought the thoughts, I fought the feelings, I fought the physical sensations, and the harder I fought, the more exhausted I became. That's where the avoidance came in. I avoided going to certain places. I avoided talking to certain people. I avoided being around people. I avoided the outside world, outside of my quote unquote safe zone. Again, that's more agoraphobic, and we'll get to that in the next episode that I talk about agoraphobia in. So, after all of that, fighting the feelings, fighting the physical sensations, and the harder that I fought, the more exhausted I became, something began to change. Not because I became fearless, not because anxiety suddenly disappeared, but because I stopped asking, how do I get rid of this? And started asking, what is my mind trying to tell me? That one question changed everything. Sometimes the answer was that I was genuinely under stress. Sometimes I was overwhelmed. Sometimes I hadn't been taking care of myself. And sometimes there wasn't an obvious reason at all. The job situation. That I was feeling overwhelmed, maybe, I guess, on a subconscious level. Maybe I was feeling stressed. Maybe I just wasn't taking care of myself because I was eating a bunch of garbage food, and maybe it caused my blood pressure to spike a little bit for whatever reason, and then the next thing you know, it caused my blood pressure to go up slightly, and that caused me to anxiety, and then my body was like, you're in danger, and boom, I go into a full-blown panic attack thinking I'm having a heart attack. But even then, understanding what my nervous system was doing was helping me respond with curiosity instead of panic. I want to be very clear about something. Curiosity doesn't erase anxiety. It doesn't. Understanding doesn't make every anxious feeling disappear, but both of them take away something incredibly important. It's the mystery. The mystery is what it takes away. Now you can understand it a little bit. And when anxiety stops feeling mysterious, it often stops feeling quite so powerful. like it has that grip over you, like it has that control over you. We talked about that earlier, about not being in control. Think about a child who wakes up in the middle of the night, convinced there's a monster in the closet, right? That's terrifying. And they're terrified. Their fear is real. I'm sure you can imagine being that child. Now, imagine being that child and you're screaming because you're terrified. You call your parents into the room because you think there's a monster in your closet, and they turn on the light. The fear wasn't foolish. The child simply didn't have all the information. Understanding changes the experience, not because the child was weak, but because light was a way of changing what darkness convinces us is there. Let that sink in. Light has a way of changing what darkness convinces us is there. The darkness is what we live in when we have anxiety or depression. When somebody sheds light on things, that's what can help understand the change in that experience. You know, I think anxiety works that way more often than we realize. When everything feels uncertain, our minds naturally fill in the blanks, usually with the worst possible outcome. Understanding turns on that light, like I just explained. Not all at once, but little by little. And every time you learn something about yourself, something about anxiety, something about your own nervous system, that darkness loses a little more of its power. That's why learning became one of the greatest tools in my recovery. Not because knowledge cured anxiety, because understanding gave me something fear never could: perspective. That's the biggest thing. It's the perspective. Thinking outside the box. Looking at it from a different perspective. Understanding it, getting all the information that you possibly can. So, as we come to the end of today's conversation, I want you to remember something. Anxiety can be incredibly convincing. It can convince you that you're in danger when you're actually safe. It can convince you that you're alone when millions of people understand exactly what you're feeling. And sometimes it can even convince you that you'll feel this way forever. But anxiety isn't a fortune teller. It's an alarm system. And alarm systems, while incredibly important, aren't always accurate. If you've been living with anxiety, I hope today's conversation helped you understand something. Your body isn't trying to hurt you. Your mind isn't trying to betray you. Your nervous system is trying to protect you the best way it knows how. And sometimes it just gets a little overprotective, like an overprotective parent. And that's something we can learn to understand. Understanding doesn't erase anxiety, but it does something almost as important. It replaces confusion with clarity, fear with curiosity, shame with compassion. And every one of these changes is a step toward healing. If you spent years asking yourself, what's wrong with me? I hope today you'll be asking a different question. What is my mind trying to protect me from? Even if you don't have the answer yet, it's a much kinder place to begin, don't you think? As we continue this journey together, we're going to keep building on what we've talked about. We're exploring panic, agoraphobia, recovery, healing, and the tools that help me slowly reclaim my life. Not because my path will be your path, but because sometimes hearing someone else's story helps us believe our own story isn't over yet. So, wherever you are today, whether your anxiety has been part of your life for years, or whether you're just beginning to understand it, I want you to know this. You're not fighting your mind. You're learning to understand it. And understanding is one of the greatest acts of compassion you can offer yourself. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Thank you for trusting me with part of your journey. And until we meet again, be gentle with yourself, be curious, keep learning. Because every time you replace fear with understanding, your inner warrior grows a little stronger. I'll see you in the next episode.